I'm ready.
Nice. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Marty Mascari. I'm with the North Central Texas Area Agency on Aging and the North Central Texas Aging and Disability Resource Center. We're blessed again to have Dr. Ron Mottern here for our series. And today we're going to talk about my loved one keeps obsessing. How can I help them get past this? And before we get started, we'll go ahead and talk about the CEUs and certificate of attendance for those of you that are looking for that today. And so the CEUs are being offered complimentary for social workers and licensed professional counselors in Texas. And for those of you that join us on a regular basis for different webinars and different series, who we provide CEUs for varies by the partnership we have, because in some cases our partners provide the CEUs, and in some cases they're set up to provide nursing CEUs and other CEUs that we're not set up to provide. But the CEUs and certificate of attendance are available, like I said, complimentary. The kind of the rules or the guidelines are the same for both. It's 1.5 classroom hours is available today. You must complete the entire webinar live in order to qualify for the CEUs. We get our records from Zoom that tells us how many minutes people are on, and that's what we use for our documentation if we're ever audited, and we have been audited about CEUs before. You must also complete the Google survey. The Google survey should pop up at the end of when you close out of your Zoom, but if it doesn't, you'll also receive the link to the Google survey in our first follow-up email that will go out later today. The Google survey will stay up for 1 week, and it'll be live. And then the CEUs, give us till the 25th to get the CEUs out. I'm a little bit behind. I was out of town for 10 days and came back and had email trouble. And so I think I'm 1 or 2 days behind in regards to the deadlines for CEUs, but we'll get caught up. But we should have those out by the 25th to you all. Could we go to the next slide, Dr. Mottern, and we'll talk about you a little bit. Our presenter today is Dr. Ron Mottern. He's the Executive Director of the Mottern Institute for Mind-Body Wellness. He has 22 years of experience in-person and worldwide virtual treatment in cognitive restructuring, behavioral modification, emotional regulation, and physical improvement. He's a published author and has a book, Living Well, a guide to cognitive behavioral skills exercises. And it is I know it's a book that includes exercises in there because I have it. It's great. And we're glad to have you, Dr. Mottern. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you go.
Okay, thank you. Glad to be here once again. So this week we are looking at my loved one keeps obsessing. So key word there is the obsessing part. So how can I help them get past this? What we want to look at today is whenever we talk about obsession, we sort of think of obsessive compulsive sorts of things. Those sort of things sort of go together. So we want to look at what exactly is obsession. When we're talking about that, what does it mean? And look at the difference between obsession and a compulsion. Then I want to look at some of the diagnoses for these: obsessive compulsive disorder, and then look at some related disorders. And many of these may be familiar to you. And then look at the difference between obsessive compulsive disorder and obsessive compulsive personality disorder, which are two entirely different things, but both of them may look similar in many ways. I want to look at some examples of OCD in entertainment. You know, as a society, we often have this, we like to make fun of people, right? And so there's a lot of comedies and what have you with OCD in there. Then I'll look at some treatments for those. So if this is obsessive compulsive disorder or a related disorder, what can we do about this? Look at some medications that are out there, some psychotherapies, and then what can I do about it? One of the first things I want to remind people is that when we're looking at this, even though I'm going to look at the disorder itself, the diagnosis from the DSM-5 TR, on this. You know, this is all these diagnoses that are in there are sort of on a continuum. I remember when I first started out in this business 22 years ago, the psychiatrist I was working with used to always remind us, because I was working in intensive residential treatment, and oftentimes a clinician would say, oh, this person has OCD or something like that. And he would always remind us that, he said, no, they have characteristics of that. They sort of have characteristics of whatever disorder it is. They have characteristics of an OCD. They're not a full-blown case of it. If they were a full-blown case of it, they wouldn't be here. They'd be in a state hospital somewhere. So remember that we're on a continuum here. Those of you who may be dealing with this, it may seem like you're further up the continuum than you actually are, just because you have to deal with it on a regular basis. But remember, once again, that these things are sort of on a continuum there, and we may not be dealing with full-blown cases of that. We're just dealing with some symptoms of that, and that certainly makes it better if we're trying to help our loved ones who are struggling with this. So once again, you know, if they have a full-blown case of that, that may require them being in a special place to get care, or to be on lots of medications for that. So what is obsession? Well, you know, one of the most famous examples of this, and you may know this, is from that Scottish play, right, by Shakespeare, Macbeth, right, where Lady Macbeth, this is her quote right here, right? Out damned spot, right? She's the one who has stabbed the king, King Duncan, and then she sees blood on her hands, and she's always washing her hands, always trying to get the blood off of them. And we see this during the play, where how this begins to affect her and what have you. There's a long period in the play where we don't see her, and then the next time we see her, she looks horrible, right? Because of this obsession and compulsion that she has, okay? So what's the difference between obsession and compulsion? Well, an obsession is intrusive and persistent thoughts we have, maybe images, urges, things like that, but I don't want them, whatever they are, right? It wouldn't be an obsession if I really wanted them. So Lady Macbeth's thoughts of guilt over the murder of the king, this is what she obsesses over. She obsesses over this guilt, and she causes her to see blood on her hands all the time. And then the compulsion is the behavior that goes with that. I'm obsessed with this, and then I engage in a behavior in order to try to alleviate this somewhat. Now, it says also mental acts, and we'll talk about what a mental act is a little bit later. But I'm sort of driven to respond in a certain way to try to alleviate the obsession once again. So she's always washing her hands, right? Trying to get rid of those imagined bloodstains. Now, oftentimes you will see compulsion. I've seen definitions of compulsion where it says, you know, I can't do anything about this. If I'm compelled to do this, I can't stop myself. That is never true, okay? I always have control over my thinking, which means I have control over my behavior. Now, it may be very, very difficult to do that, okay? I'm not saying it's not difficult, but with a compulsion, you know, if I'm compelled to do something, I have a very strong a response to something. I really want to engage in this behavior because the behavior gives me some relief from the obsession. But don't think just because I have a compulsion, I have to do something. If we did that, our criminal justice system would be full of people with obsessive-compulsive disorder. Okay, so here's sort of the cycle of this. So we have that obsessive thought up there in the right-hand corner, right? That's really what starts it, right? Remember that we don't really do anything without thinking about it. We're always thinking about things. Most of it is on an unconscious level, so we're not aware of that thinking, but it is there. So we want to sort of identify that. I have that obsessive thought, and then I become anxious. Right, this anxiety gets me, and then I engage in the compulsive behavior, whatever the behavior happens to be, and they can be sort of bizarre, much like trying to wash my hands of blood, right, that's not really there, right? I develop this behavior because the behavior alleviates the anxiety. The behavior gives me some relief from that anxiety that I'm feeling because of the obsessive thoughts I'm having. And this cycle just continues to go and go and go, right? So That's sort of the vicious cycle of OCD there. And we want to look at some examples of this. So I might have an obsession with cleanliness, okay? And so I wash everything, okay? I'm washing and scrubbing and doing all this. And, the obsession with cleanliness means everything must be spotless. Everything must be sanitized, right? Once again, remember, this is sort of a continuum that we have here, that just because I like things clean doesn't mean I'm OCD. Just because I like things in their place does not mean that I'm OCD. We use that in the vernacular, right? In the common language, we'll say that, oh, well, this guy is OCD or what have you. But probably not. If at all, I'm on the very low end of that, right? When I get to this being a full-blown obsession, when I get to that end of the continuum, this is going to cause me problems. I'm spending so much time cleaning things, and once we get to the disorder itself, we'll look at that some more. But so I'm washing everything to make sure everything's good. A lot of these have to do with safety. Okay, in general, we could say all of them have to do with safety, because I'm feeling anxious, and by engaging in these compulsions and these behaviors, then that's when I feel more safe. We could look at sort of, they're all attempts to control what's going on inside of me, okay? But safety may be one, so I may check locks, right? I may check the locks 15 times, and I have to 15 times I have to lock the door. I lock it, I unlock it, I lock it, I unlock it, I lock it, unlock it, okay? So I'm obsessed with safety, but my compulsion is to check the locks. And oftentimes there'll be a number of these things, right? I maybe, I have to do it 15 times, or once I do it 15 times, okay, I'm good for right now. Okay. So once again, that's the compulsion. So safety, once again, may be a concern. So I count things, sort of like we did with that, but it may be something like steps. I have to take so many steps to my bed, or I have to take so many steps out the door to my car, or things of this nature. Okay, so I'll count these things as I go. Okay, I have to get to my car in 12 steps, or bad things will happen. So I work on getting there in 12 steps. And when I do that, once again, gives me some temporary relief from the anxiety that I feel about safety in my life. Safety may also be applied to certain sayings that I have, right? I may have a little rhyme that I say to myself, right? Well, I'm thinking here of a movie, especially when this came up with The Accountant. I don't know whether you've ever seen that. Sort of an action adventure movie. He wasn't obsessive compulsive per se. The character was autistic, so there's a difference there. But he did have a little saying that he would say whenever he got nervous and what have you. He would repeat this little nursery rhyme to himself, and that nursery rhyme would then help him to relax, to get focused back on what he's doing. Obsessive people will often do the same thing. They'll often have a compulsion to say a particular nursery rhyme. Don't try to figure this out logically. There's not really a logical reason why they pick what they pick. I mean, there may be to them in some manner of thinking, but it's usually just sort of random. There's something about it that makes them feel safe. There's something about it that helps them calm down, to relieve that anxiety. So that's what they use. Maybe it was a saying that they heard in childhood. They remember being, their mother used to say it to them when they were small, and it helped them relax. So that's what they get later on. That's what they do later on. So that may be another one. I may have an obsession with holiness, right? This comes out, and praying, and this is the mental act. This would be an exact. It's not a behavior necessarily, but it's a mental act. It's something I may do mentally that I have to go over because I'm feeling unclean, right? I'm feeling sinful or what have you. And people have this as well. So the praying is, once again, the compulsion part of it, but it's a mental act more so than a behavior. It can be both. It can be both, but that would be an example of a mental act there. And let's look at obsessive compulsive disorder here. Okay, now this is the disorder itself. This is the diagnosis that we have. So the first aspect of this is I either have to have an obsession or a compulsion or both, right? So OCD, I can have just the obsession and it can be OCD. It's more on that end of the scale, or I could have a compulsion to do something, right? Probably an obsession with that, but I may not be aware of it, but I may have the compulsion or both of them. And that's where we get OCD, right? The obsessive compulsive disorder. This is the thing here. The obsessions or compulsions are time consuming. We talked about cleanliness earlier, where I had an obsession with cleanliness, so I spent time cleaning. I said, well, you know, that's not necessarily bad, right? I think maybe I need more of that around my house, right? I need to be a little more obsessive compulsive about the cleanliness around my, you know, everything has its place and, you know, and what have you, but sometimes the dust builds up. So I may need some of that. But with OCD, right, the obsessions and compulsions are time consuming. This is not something that I'm doing that's going to take 10 minutes a day. This is going to take more than an hour of my day. I'm going to spend at least an hour, you know, cleaning before I go out. This is every day, right? This is just one time a week, right? This is every day. Before I can leave, I have to go in. I have to clean this stuff if that was our obsession. But whatever it is, it's taking me more than an hour of the day, and it causes me significant distress in my life, okay? This is always an aspect. Anytime we're going to diagnose any psychological disorder, this is an aspect of that. If it's not hurting me and it's not hurting other people, then what's the problem, right? This is causing me significant distress. I've dealt with people before who had certain behaviors that, you know, they came to me, they said, you know, I have this problem with this behavior. And I said, okay, well, how is it causing you distress? I mean, it doesn't, it's something that everybody else does. Why is this a problem for you? And I remember one young man in particular said, you know, he says, I'm spending so much time doing this that I'm going to get fired from my job, right? But I can't work. That when I'm at work, I'm still doing this compulsive behavior. So I'm getting ready to get fired. So for him, definitely in that situation, it was taking up so much time that it was causing him distress in his job, okay, in his occupation. So that's always an aspect. And it's not just for OCD, once again, but it's for many different things, okay? The obsessive compulsive behaviors are not attributed to other physical effects, right? For example, substance abuse, right? So I may be at substance abuse and I keep doing something over and over again because of the substance that I'm taking, okay? We'll sort of see this in some of the obsessive compulsive related disorders, but I just keep repeating the same behavior over again because I'm on the drug, okay? Certain medications that are prescribed can also cause that, okay? So we have to rule those out. We have to say, okay, well, is this caused by a psychological thing that's going on, or is it caused physiologically by a drug of abuse or a drug that's prescribed to me that I'm taking as I should and just have that side effect? And we have to figure that out. Or any other medical condition, right? I have to be able to pinpoint that, okay, this is what's going on. It's psychological and it's not another medical condition in and of itself, because it may very well be. And as with any of these things, right, I always want to go to my PCP, my primary care physician. I always want to go to them. I always want to get checked out or have my loved one get checked out for these things, because there may actually be some medical reason for this. So I want to eliminate that. If the PCP says, no, there's nothing, you know, we can't find anything, this seems to be psychological, then that's when I may look at a psychiatrist or psychotherapist, something like that, okay? And once again, the disturbance is not better explained by the symptoms of another mental disorder, okay? So once again, we have to rule out what it is. Anytime we diagnosis is a rule out process, okay? So I have to rule out everything else, and what's left is the diagnosis, okay? So when I look at this, it's not caused by a medical condition. It's not caused by any drugs that I might be taking. It's not caused by something else like generalized anxiety disorder, body dysmorphic disorder, hoarding disorder, trichotillomania, something like this. Some of these are obsessive compulsive related disorders, but aren't OCD themselves. So, so we have to rule these things out. If we can rule those out, then we're sort of left with, okay, well, this is obsessive compulsive disorder that can be diagnosed. Now, not everyone diagnoses, okay? Once again, the psychiatrist that I started out with didn't diagnose in those situations. And also, I know of other people who don't really diagnose either. Now, if I want to get paid by insurance, I have to come up with a diagnosis because that's what they're going to want, right? But if I'm not worried about insurance, if I only take private pay, if I do these sorts of things, then I don't have to diagnose at all. I can say, okay, well, this is the problem that we're having. There's some symptoms that lead me to believe that this may be what it is, which is what a diagnosis is anyway. It sort of tells us, gives us a list of things that we can sort of look at so that then we can apply some remedies to those sorts of things. So once again, this is the diagnosis on that. We would diagnose from that as obsessive-compulsive disorder. Now, does that sound like your loved one? Well, it may, okay, some sort of things that it sort of may be there, okay, that, you know, this seems to be an obsession, seems to be a compulsive. Maybe they're not taking an hour a day, but they spend, you know, 10 or 20 minutes doing that. This is the reason you want to get somebody to diagnose that, right? Because once again, you may be sort of on a scale, right? Maybe on a continuum where, yeah, they're doing this. Maybe they're not diagnosable as suffering from obsessive compulsive disorder, but there may be certain things that we can do that we need to look at that'll make life easier for them and make life easier for us as we try to care for them. So that's the obsessive compulsive disorder. Now we have some OCD related disorders, okay? One of these is called body dysmorphic disorder. Interestingly enough, I mean, it's been a diagnosis for a while, but it pops up primarily now. We're seeing it in gay men and especially in children, in teenagers, okay? So body dysmorphic disorder is I'm preoccupied with one or more defects, physical defects that I think I have, okay? They're perceived defects. Doesn't mean they're actually there. It's just when I look at myself in the mirror, I see this sort of defect that's there. Somebody else may not see it at all. They say, well, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't see anything. Or I may exaggerate what I think is that defect, right? So, you know, my nose may be slightly large or something. Nobody else notices that, right? Nobody, you know, it's proportional to your face. I don't see what the problem is. But for me, it's just, oh, it's just, that's all that I see, right? There's a big nose there. So that body dysmorphic disorder, I'm preoccupied with more and more perceived flaws that I may have in my physical appearance. At some point in the disorder, I perform repetitive behaviors. These are the sort of the compulsion. This is sort of why it gets under OCD, right? I'm always checking the mirror, right? Oh, did my nose shrink any, right? Well, no, it didn't. It's still there. Okay, excessive grooming, especially as a way to sort of cover up anything that I might think is a flaw. I may groom myself to cover that stuff up. Maybe, you know, I may have a bald spot, which I do in the back of my head. I don't think about it because I don't ever see the back of my head. When I see a picture or something, I know it's there. But if I had this body dysmorphic disorder, I would make sure that I spend you know, an amount of time looking in the mirror, covering up that bald spot to make sure nobody else saw it because it's so glaring. Okay, just from a historical perspective, he probably didn't suffer from body dysmorphic disorder, but we know from some of the writings about Julius Caesar that his hair was arranged, you know, he was sort of bald, but he had his hair arranged where it didn't look like that way. And I think it was Cicero who would talk about he would just take sort of one finger and scratch his head, right? So he didn't disturb his hair. Okay. But once again, I don't think Julius Caesar, I'm not saying he had body dysmorphic disorder, but that would be sort of the thing that I would do, right? My head itched or something, I might, you know, just barely do that because I didn't want to mess it up. And then I'd have, even if I didn't, I'd have to go back and do it anyway. Skin picking is another one of that may be around there. Reassurance seeking. Okay, are you sure I look okay? Are you sure this is okay? Just over and over and over again. Once again, that compulsive behavior that goes with that. Okay, and once again, all of these are in response to concerns about how I look. Once again, it has to cause me significant distress or impairment in my life, right? If I keep going to the bathroom at work to look in the mirror, my boss is going to say, you've been to the bathroom 15 times. It's not even lunch yet. What's going on here? Okay, so it may cause me some occupational distress, may cause me distress in social or other important areas of my life. And that's what really makes it a problem. Once again, if we don't have that, is it really a problem? I don't know. Maybe, but we'd have to look at it. And once again, it's not better explained by something else, right? As we look at this, maybe some of the mirror, looking at the mirror and stuff and seeing myself, oh, I look so big, maybe more related to an eating disorder or something like that. So we have to rule that out, right? We'd have to look at the eating disorder and say, no, it's not the eating disorder. Maybe it fits under body dysmorphic disorder better. Okay. So once again, those two, C and D at the bottom, you're going to see for just about every psychological diagnosis, psychiatric diagnosis that there is. Those sort of have to be present there for it to be, considered a real problem in my life. I can have problems in my life without those two things going on, but it becomes more of a concern for a therapist than it does for medication or something like that. Okay, another one is hoarding disorder. I know that many of you may suffer with loved ones who have this problem, right? Or it seems that they do anyway, right? I know that my father, I wouldn't say he's a hoarder, but I know he holds on to things, right? He holds on to things like wood. We moved many times during my childhood, multiple times, and he would pack like a 2-foot piece of 2x4 with him. Say, why are you taking that piece of? Well, we may need it. Okay. Some of these things may be due to other things. Okay. But anyway, that hoarding disorder, I have persistent difficulty getting rid of stuff, right? Discarding them, parting with them, regardless of their actual value, right? It's a 2-foot piece of 2x4. It doesn't cost that much. These days, its value has increased dramatically. But back then, it was just a piece of wood. Why are we keeping that, right? So it sort of makes you think in that way. The difficulties due to a perceived need to save the items, and sort of the distress associated. So, I mean, we can often think of things like it has sentimental value, right? So I have sentimental value with something, and so I need to save them. I need to hold on to them. However, if someone was to get rid of them, then I would experience some distress. If I had a hoarding disorder, I would be in distress because of that. So, excuse me, that would be one of the things we would look at. The difficulty discarding the possession results in the accumulation of possessions that congest and clutter our living areas. Okay, so you may have seen hoarders on television, right? And we have things stacked up all over the house. In my living area, I can't get around in it, right? I can't sit in my living room and visit with somebody or watch television because of all the stuff that I have stacked up in there, old newspapers, magazines, National Geographics, okay, that are stacked up in there. Just, the house is so cluttered, I have nothing else to do with them, so I have to stack them in there. If, however, the living areas are uncluttered, it's only because somebody else has come in and said, we need to get this straightened up, right? A loved one has come in and said, we can't have this stuff in the living room. We can't get around in here. It's a danger. We need to move this stuff, put it in the basement, do whatever, the attic, get rid of it. Okay. If we have somebody who comes in and cleans the house, then they're saying, we've got to move this stuff. I can't clean the house with all this stuff there. And then maybe it gets to the point where the authorities are coming in and saying, no, this is a fire hazard. This is a risk. You have to do this. These sorts of things are what we're looking at with hoarding disorder, right? Remember, all of these things are sort of on a scale. So just because I hoard things doesn't mean I have the disorder, right? I may be drifting toward the disorder, but I may hold on to things, but they don't really interfere with people getting around the house or something like that on a regular basis. I may save things for a while and then get rid of them later. So once again, everything's sort of on a continuum. Before we diagnose anything, We want to make sure that we get a professional diagnosis on that. You know, I've heard people say, oh, she's a hoarder, he's a hoarder, something like that. Well, are they really, or are they just somewhere sort of on that continuum? Is it a full-blown case of hoarding disorder? Can we diagnose that? Or is this just something that's sort of on a continuum, sort of leading up to that? Okay, may cause us some concern, right? In fact, we may want to address it before it becomes a disorder. But once again, you know, in the vernacular, you know, just when in our daily lives, we often call things something that they're not, right? We may say somebody has OCD when, you know, they're a little squirrely, but maybe not OCD, right? So same thing with hoarding. Okay, are people collecting things? Well, they may be collecting things, but is it hoarding disorder? I don't think we're quite there yet. Okay, so may want to intervene before we get there. But once again, let's not rush to diagnose. Let's be careful with the language. I know in your daily life you don't have to do that. However, if you're a professional, I encourage you to be very careful about that. Right? I used to teach in the Master's of Psychology program at a university. And I had to always remind the students that, you know, they would say something like that. This person is OCD or something. Wait a minute. You know, do they meet the diagnostic criteria for this? Can this not be better explained by something else? Make sure that what you're saying is true, because there's a lot of things that go along. If we get diagnosed with something that goes on the medical record, that medical record never goes away. Okay, it may be in remission, okay, but it never goes away. So want to be very careful with the language we use. You know, does somebody, once again, do they have some characteristics of this? Well, maybe, yeah, they have some characteristics of it, right? But let's not rush to diagnose anything. Okay. Another part of hoarding disorder, once again, are those two things we always talk about. Causes me significant clinical distress in my life for some reason, and then I can't contribute it to any other medical condition. Maybe a brain injury, maybe cerebrovascular disease, Prader-Willi syndrome. Okay, that may be there as well. Prader-Willi syndrome is a genetic disorder where I never feel full. Okay, so I may hoard things to eat and what have you. And once again, it's not better explained by something else. Those things, those three things, there are things we always want to look at when we're diagnosing something. And we don't really need to be diagnosing anything unless we're the psychiatrist or the primary care physician. Okay, another one that I have met many times over the years, I've had lots of experience with people, is with trichotillomania. And trichotillomania is hair pulling. People will pull on their hair until they pull it out. I've seen people with bald spots that big on their head where they just kept pulling that hair and pulling that hair. Once again, this is usually a result of anxiety, right? I'm anxious about some area in my life, and they just do this and it becomes unconscious, much like all the other ones too. I mean, nobody sets out to be a hoarder, right? But it sort of becomes an unconscious behavior that they're doing, and then they do it until they pull their hair out. They have big patches, just bald patches on their head, or it's often the eyebrows, right? I've seen that as well, where women will pluck their eyebrows out. They don't have any. They have to draw them in with a mascara pen. Okay, there's nothing there. Okay, so that trichotillomania, recurrent pulling out of your hair resulting in hair loss. Okay, repeated attempts. I have to stop it, right? I have to try to stop it, and this is where the compulsion comes in, right? I'm trying to stop this. I find it very difficult to stop that behavior, because in some way it provides me with relief, just as all the other ones do, just as the hoarding does, or looking in the mirror or something like that, or any behaviors that are associated with OCD itself. These things cause me some amount of relief. Okay, and that's the reason that they become patterns of behavior. I do not develop any pattern of behavior in my life that doesn't serve a purpose for me. If I have this pattern of behavior, it serves a purpose for me. In reality therapy, we would say it meets one of my needs in some way. Okay, so the treatment there would be to find a better way, right? So find something else that doesn't leave me with big bald spots on my head or no eyebrows or what have you. Once again, this is going to cause me clinical significant distress. We can see how that might occur. You know, if I'm in a professional position in my life, you know, I may have to start wearing a wig because I pulled my hair out. Okay. Now, there's nothing wrong with wearing a wig, right? But if I'm wearing a wig because I pulled my hair out, that's the problem, right? So it's going to cause me significant distress in some area of my life. Can't attribute it to something else. You know, there's a dermatological condition that I may have that causes my hair loss. I may have alopecia or something like that. It's not that, okay? It's caused by me pulling out my hair. And once again, not explained by another medical disorder, perhaps by body dysmorphic disorder, right? I may think I have too much hair. I may think the hair doesn't look right, hair doesn't look good, so I pull it out, okay? In that case, maybe we're looking at body dysmorphic disorder and not actually trichotillomania. So we have to sort of rule out those other things, as I said. Okay, excoriation, that's the skin picking disorder. Oftentimes we'll see skin picking in older adults just because the skin gets dry and it begins to itch, right? So so that's not quite the same thing. Sometimes older people have excoriation? Yes. Is it the disorder? Probably not. Okay, we'd have to look at it. So the recurrent skin picking results in skin lesions. So I'm picking at myself until I'm causing, you know, spots on my body. I'm causing lesions on my body with this. Once again, I have to try to stop it, right? I have this attempt to decrease or to stop what I'm doing and just can't seem to follow through with that. Okay, so that's sort of the compulsion that we're talking about. It causes me clinically significant distress or impairment in my daily life, right? You know, I may not be able to go out because I have these lesions on me. It looks horrible. Can't contribute it to physiological effects of substances. I found it very interesting that they used cocaine on this. In all of my years of substance abuse, I've never really known a cocaine addict who was a picker like that. It can occur. I know it can occur. Cocaine is a stimulant. Most often we see it with methamphetamines, however. This is what they call meth bugs, right? That people will pick. And if you've ever seen Faces of Meth, you'll see the face is all where people pick at the face and things like that. More, I mean, it's still associated with the stimulants. You can't have it from cocaine. But I found it interesting because we most often see it with meth that they use cocaine on this. Or it can't be associated with another medical condition, right? Scabies, something like that. And can't be explained by symptoms of another medical disorder. So the excoriation, the skin picking disorder, that's something, once again, that occurs oftentimes in older adults simply because the skin becomes dry, especially if I'm taking certain medications. If I'm taking certain medications, that may also cause my skin to dry out, and then that causes it to itch. So I find myself itching all the time because of this dermatological condition and not really because of a psychological disorder, right? So we have to look at these things in context. We want to look at all of them in context, you know, what's really going on here. Have a professional come in, look at these things as we go forward with them. Okay. Now, what's the difference between obsessive-compulsive disorder and obsessive-compulsive personality disorder? Well, the name itself is one thing. There's a difference between a personality disorder and just a disorder, right? So OCD is under the DSM-5 TR is under OCD, right? And OCD type disorders. Obsessive-compulsive personality disorders is under the personality disorders because it's a little something different. And this may be more of what you're actually seeing. Not that your loved one has a personality disorder, right? No, once again, we don't want to diagnose there. But this may be some of the things that you see when we say, oh, that person is OCD or something like that. Okay. So the first one on there is this OCD, obsessive-compulsive personality disorder, excuse me, is a pervasive pattern of preoccupation with orderliness, perfectionism, mental and interpersonal control, and all of these things. I'm not flexible, okay, as far as they're concerned. I'm not open to another way of doing things. It doesn't matter if what I'm doing is efficient or not. It needs to be this way. It begins usually in early adulthood. And I have to have 4 or more of the following symptoms for it to be obsessive compulsive personality disorder. But you'll see how, as I look at this, well, this person is sort of obsessed with orderliness, okay? My wife likes to say that before we got married, you know, when she came over to my house, everything was in its place. There was a place for everything. Every now and then the dust would get a little bit, but everything was, you know, the handles in my pots were, you know, faced in the same direction in the cabinet, something like these sorts of things. They weren't facing north necessarily, weren't facing a direction. They were just facing in the same direction. But anyway, so she'll sometimes say that, right? That orderliness, perfectionism, everything has to be just right on this. Is that really a disorder? No, it's just I'm neat. Okay, so they just be neat, but oftentimes if they're neater than us, we might say, oh, well, that's OCD or, you know, obsessive compulsive personality disorder. But of the four things that have to be there, I'm preoccupied with details, rules, lists, order, organization, schedules, any of this stuff. I'm obsessed with those things to the point of the original point of it is lost. Okay, why am I keeping this list? Why do I follow this rule? Well, I don't know, but I have to follow the rule. Okay, that's where it sort of comes in. Well, why are you stopping at this stop sign in the middle of West Texas when you can obviously see, you know, for 14 miles in any direction that nothing is coming? Well, because it's a stop sign and I must stop at a stop sign. And when we look at thinking, oftentimes the thinking is the must stuff, right? I must do this, okay? So those sort of, I catch myself saying things like that. That's oftentimes a giveaway that maybe I have a preoccupation with this, okay? To the point where, you know, the point of it is just lost in the fact of in the doing of it. Okay, the perfectionism interferes actually with the task completion. Okay, so I get started on something. My boss gives me a project, and I'm working on that, and I get so caught up in making it perfect that it never gets completed. Right? You have a deadline. I need this done by Friday. Well, I spend so much time, oh, well, this has to be perfect. I have to have the perfect introduction to this. I have to have the perfect, you know, body and slides and all of this other stuff, to the point where it doesn't get done. Friday comes, where is this? Well, I'm still working on the presentation. I'm still working on the you know, preview of it in there. I'm still working on the body of it or what have you. It's not a complete project. Okay, so that in and of itself, those overly strict standards that I set for myself, I don't meet them, and that interferes with whatever it is I'm actually trying to do, right? Is excessively devoted to work and productivity to the exclusion of leisure activities and friendships, okay? I don't have any friends. I don't get to engage in any leisure activities because I'm always at work. I have to be productive. I have to do this, and it's not accounted for, notice, by obvious economic necessity. Okay, as our economy tends to get a little worse, right, we may all find ourselves working a little more, right, as we go forward. But it's not because we feel the compulsion to do that, right? It's because there's some economic necessity behind that. Number 4 is over-conscientious, scrupulous, inflexible about matters of morality, ethics, and values. Okay, once again, these aren't not accounted for by cultural and religious identification, but it's just, no, this is wrong because it's wrong. Okay, I'm not looking at, well, what's the purpose? What's the reason we have this rule or what have you? As I go through this, it's the rule, so I have to follow the rule. Okay, so I must follow rules. Once again, that must comes up. You know, rational emotive behavior therapy, one of the major types of therapy, talks a lot about musts, right? When we must do this, we must do that. Generally indicates we're on the trail of a belief if we do that. But that's what it is. I'm just inflexible in matters of this, right? There's no reason to move outside the lines on this. There's no extenuating circumstances. I must do this. Okay. Number 5 here is unable to discard worn out or worthless objects, even when there are no sentimental, even if I don't have a sentimental value on something, I just can't get rid of it, right? Well, I may need it later. Okay, I may need this later. Now, many of you may have parents or grandparents or something like that who grew up during the Depression, right? So when you grew up during the Depression, you didn't throw things away. I think that's a lot of maybe my father's stuff, holding on to stuff and what have you, is that I may find a use for that later on. And just to say this, sure enough, if I threw that away, then a week later he'd need it. Okay, we would have something we're working on. Where's the 2x4? Well, I threw the 2x4 away. Okay, but in obsessive compulsive personality disorder, there's no sentimental value to it at all. It's worthless, right? It's worn out. It's worthless. It has no use. Okay, but I'm holding on to it anyway. Like I said, some of that may be more related to the way people grew up. If they grew up during the Depression, you repurposed stuff, right? If my underwear got holes in them, then I used them as rags, okay, dust rags or whatever it happened to be. You just didn't throw them away. You didn't throw stuff out. Why did grandmother wash her aluminum foil, right? Why did she wash her aluminum foil and reuse it? Well, that's because when she grew up, you didn't throw that stuff out. That was a reusable object. People couldn't afford to do that. We may be getting close to that these days. I'm not washing my aluminum foil yet, but we may get to a point where I have to. Number 6 is reluctant to delegate tasks to work with others unless they do things my way. If you don't want to do things it's my way or the highway. Okay, I'm not going to work with this person because they're not going to do it my way, and so that's going to cause me problems, right? Especially in the workplace. Okay, but also in my personal life. Okay, if I connections are very important. We've talked about that many times, but I just don't want to be around somebody unless you're going to do things my way. And then number 7, excuse me, adopts a miserly spending style toward self and others, but not because I don't have any money, but because money is viewed as something that I have to hoard, right? That there may be a future catastrophe. Things are getting bad financially these days. We're headed for a disaster. I've got to save this money. I've got to save this up to deal with that future catastrophe that may or may not come, right? In my mind, I'm seeing with that. So once again, I'm sort of like, as we look at sort of obsessive compulsive things, safety may be the obsession, and the compulsion is I hoard money, right, for this future catastrophe. And then all of these are, rigidity and stubbornness are a part of all of those things that I do. I'm not going to bend on this. And that anytime I see that rigidity and really stubbornness because of that, that's a sort of a sign, right, that things may be headed toward a problem. Remember, this is a personality disorder, and when we talk about personality disorders, we talk about the difference between states and traits, right? So many of you may be dealing with loved ones who sort of have this state that they go through. States are, once again, like the weather, okay? Whereas traits are like the climate. So if we're dealing with a personality disorder, these things are like the climate. They are fixed. They do not vary. They are rigid. They don't change. A state, I may be this way one time, and then I maybe not be that way another time, right? You may be able to reason with me, and so this is what we do. Okay, all right. So what are some things that we may look at, okay, tonight, if we need some entertainment, that may be sort of the characteristics of OCD, right? Are they full-blown cases of OCD? Maybe not. But there's some characteristics of those. Remember, this is Hollywood, right? We're looking at some entertainment examples here, and Hollywood's never truthful about anything very much, right? So Macbeth, right? If we want to watch Macbeth or read Macbeth, is that example of OCD? Yes, it is a classic example. We can diagnose it, right? This is OCD, and for Lady Macbeth. Another one is the movie As Good as It Gets, right? The character of Melvin Udall, played by Jack Nicholson there on the right. Does he have OCD? Yes, most certainly. And you can see that he has, once again, he has the number, he has the locks, he has to do 7 times or whatever it is. He has to, he says several locks on the door and he has to do each one of them a certain number of times. He doesn't step on cracks. So when he walks down the sidewalk, he's always avoiding cracks in the sidewalk. And that's where that little saying may come in, right? That, step on a crack, break your mother's back. As I say this, that helps me avoid the cracks and helps relieve my anxiety about it. When he goes to this restaurant, he sits in the same place. He orders the same thing. He brings his own silverware. It has to be set out just right. So you can see it's a humorous movie, but they did get some of the characteristics of that right. So is that a example of OCD? Yes. The Aviator with Howard Hughes. Certainly from what I've heard of Howard Hughes, there were certain things. He was sort of a germaphobe, right? So there were certain behaviors he engaged in. The obsession would be with cleanliness, and the compulsion would be those behaviors that he engaged in to avoid uncleanliness, to avoid germs and what have you. Diagnosable case, probably, yeah. Matchstick Men, the character of Roy Waller. I haven't seen that movie, but what I've heard about the character, what I've read about the character, that's definitely, we could say that's OCD, okay? Now, here's one, The Odd Couple, right? I don't think I've ever seen the movie The Odd Couple, but I grew up on the series of the television series The Odd Couple, right? So Felix Unger is in there, right? Now, if you were going to point to anybody who's OCD, you'd say, well, Felix is really, everything has to be just right and everything. Is that really OCD? No, I don't. No, not exactly. Okay. Does he have characteristics of it? Is he a very tidy person and things? Yes, yes, indeed, he is. He certainly has characteristics of it. But are we going to, unless we're being paid by an insurance company, are we going to diagnose him as OCD? Probably not. Okay. Does he have characteristics of it? Yes. Okay, but not really the disorder itself. What about Bob, the character of Bob? This was with, doggone it, Richard Dreyfuss was in it, and gee, I can't remember who Bob is. Anyway, famous comedian. I'll think about it later. Diagnosable as OCD? No, not really. Does he have some characteristics of it? Yes. And this is one of those that's just sort of so over the top because of the comedy that we can't, we're not going to diagnose anything from this. Are there certain things that he does that we could say, well, that's sort of characteristic of OCD? Yes, indeed. Grosse Pointe Blank is one. The character of Martin Blank, if you've never seen that, it's one of my favorite movies. Martin Blank, he can't sit with his back to the door. He has to have things arranged in a certain way. He has to be able, lines of sight and things. Is that OCD? No, because it's better explained by something else, okay? And in this, Martin Blank is an assassin, right? He's a hitman. So he has to do these things for his own safety. It's not because he's obsessive compulsive necessarily, but because he does them for his own safety. There's a better explanation for what he's doing than the OCD. Mommy Dearest, okay, Joan Crawford character. You may be familiar with that, right? No metal hangers, right? It goes on. OCD, I don't think so. I think it's better explained by another personality disorder or disorders. I think definitely we're looking at borderline personality disorder there. Not so much the obsessive compulsive aspect of that as far as the disorder goes. And then Rain Man, that Raymond Babbitt with Tom Cruise and Dustin Hoffman in there. Certainly Rain Man, he counts things, right? He has a certain way he has to do things. But is it OCD? No, because it's better explained by something else. The character is autistic, okay? And this is what I was saying earlier when we first began, sort of the character in The Accountant. He also has a highly functional form of autism. He has that little saying that he says that helps him to calm down and what have you. So those sorts of behaviors are better explained by something else, okay? So Grosse Pointe Blank, Mommy Dearest, Rain Man. OCD types of sort of things. We looked at that. If we didn't know better, could we say that it maybe was? Maybe, but they're not really, because they're better explained by something else, okay? All right. So what can we do about this? If it is OCD, right, or if we're pretty far up the continuum on this and we need some relief, we can, and the PCP, refers us to a therapist, or, the psychiatrist thinks that, this is what we need to do to deal with it. And I encourage you to, you're always your own advocate for different things. So keep that in mind as you deal with this. Mostly what we're dealing with here is antidepressants, right? So you're dealing with antidepressants that may be given at different times, Prozac, Zoloft, Paxil, these sorts of things that help deal with the anxiety. If you think back to our vicious cycle, right? I have these thoughts that then cause me anxiety, and then I start to engage in the behavior. So, excuse me. So in order to relieve the anxiety that's caused by the thinking, that's when we may describe antidepressants. Now, coming from, a cognitive behavioral background, this is, let's deal with the thoughts, okay? Before we can deal with the thoughts, we may have to have some medication, right? They have to get a person to a level where they can actually do the cognitive behavioral work. Doesn't mean we need to stay on it forever, okay? But we may need some for a while to help us stabilize, so we can actually learn the cognitive behavioral skills we need to use to decrease the anxiety that then causes those compulsive behaviors. Besides these, your physician may give, or your psychiatrist may prescribe other types of antidepressants, or maybe even psychiatric medications. That's going to be a bad case of that. That's going to obviously be a full-blown case of that, probably, if he's going to give you psych meds, because those have iatrogenic effects. Some of those iatrogenic effects are things that cause harm. Okay, so, and one of the ways that we know that is because now you're seeing commercials on television that get rid of the effects of those, get rid of those iatrogenic effects. Okay, tardive dyskinesia is something that's caused by psychiatric medications, and we now have so much of it that they're now advertising medications for the tardive dyskinesia on television. But maybe in a situation where I have to take those, talk to your PCP, talk to your psychiatrist, be your own advocate in these things. Okay, psychotherapy, once again, we don't do anything without thinking about it. So we have these obsessive thoughts that cause the anxiety that then produce the compulsive behavior, right? Well, in CBT, we look at thinking, that's the cognition. We look at the behavior, that's the behavioral part of that, okay? So looking at how do we deal with these thoughts, okay? That's one aspect of that. Exposure and response prevention is a component of a CBT that is really the exposure part of this. It exposes me to whatever I'm anxious about over and over again. I get close to the crack in the sidewalk, right? Or maybe I step on the crack just quickly, right? Until this goes. We often see the exposure therapy and things like, a fear of animals, right? I have a fear of dogs, so I get closer to the dog until I can actually pet the dog and things like that. Spiders, snakes, these sorts of things. Exposure therapy is often used, and often with other things as well. But anything that causes me anxiety, I can use the exposure therapy to deal with that. So those are some things that we can do. Once again, I come from a cognitive behavioral background, so this is, I'm always pushing that. Okay, but once again, you have to make your own decisions. So what can we do about it? So I have this loved one. They may be somewhere on this continuum, right? They may be diagnosable as OCD or OCD type disorder, or even obsessive-compulsive personality disorder. So what can I do about this if it really is? Well, first thing, it has to be diagnosed by a professional, right? So and before you can do that, as this is going on, when you're dealing with the professional, practice empathy with your loved one. I know that's hard. Empathy is understanding and responding to the feelings of others. Okay, so practice empathy within, seek treatment, okay, with a professional, and then seek treatment yourself, okay, because you have to deal with this, right? You're dealing with this on a daily basis. So you may need some stress management yourself. You may need some anxiety relief yourself. So make sure, can't pour from an empty cup. Okay, so take care of yourself. If you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of your loved ones. So make sure that you are, make sure you're taking care of yourself. If it's OCD type symptoms that we see, once again, practice empathy, understand that there's something going on that's making this person feel very anxious. So they engage in these types of behaviors, okay? And do a little cognitive restructuring, okay? And maybe teach them some cognitive restructuring, okay? And what that is cognitive restructuring has 3 parts, okay? Step number 1, pay attention to my thoughts and feelings. Step number 2, recognize the risk in my thoughts and feelings. And this, we have to, when we recognize the risk in that, may not be a full-blown risk like we have if we're going to diagnose the disorder itself. Maybe on that continuum, we may have characteristics of it, but what is the risk in that? What does this cause me? So getting people to think about, you know, I do this over and over again. What is this causing me? Okay. You know, I'm scratching over and over again. What does this do? Well, it causes skin lesions, right? It opens me up to other bacteria and viruses that may get into that. So it's not healthy for me to do that. So that may be going on. And then step number 3 is to replace the risk thoughts with new thoughts to help reduce the risk. Okay, so those are 3 just very simple steps for cognitive restructuring. Once again, we have 50 to 70,000 thoughts going through our head every single day. Most of those are unconscious. What we want to do is we want to pay attention to them, because the thoughts create the emotions, the thoughts create the feelings, the thoughts create the anxiety that I'm feeling. So if I can get to the thoughts, I can change the thoughts and reduce those feelings of anxiety. Once again, this is from a cognitive standpoint, cognitive behavioral standpoint. Okay. Other people may have other ideas about that if they come from other modalities. Okay. If you want to know how thinking causes emotions, here's you a link to do that. This is a TED Talk by Lisa Feldman Barrett. She wrote the book on how emotions are made, and this is a little talk she gives, and she does a very good job on it. So if you want to know how emotions are made, then give that a look-see. Okay, very good video. Okay, so what else can I do? Well, I can sort of do some cognitive restructurings by challenging the thoughts that are going on once again and practicing those, what we call the 4 questions. Now, these are things that Byron Katie uses. You might be familiar with her. You might be familiar with what she calls the work. Okay. This is cognitive restructuring. She doesn't call it that. She calls it the work, and she calls it the 4 questions. But let me assure you, it's cognitive restructuring, whatever, where I'm reframing what's going on. So it starts out with just a 1-line statement of my problem. Okay, I'm afraid there won't be enough money to buy, sorry, a typo there, new things if I need them. Okay, so the first question I ask is that true? Is it true that there won't be enough money to buy the new things if you need them? Well, maybe it might be. I might need things I don't have the money for. Okay, can you absolutely be certain that that's true, that you won't have enough money to buy what you need? Well, no, I can't be certain about that. So you can't be certain about it. But if you think that it's going to happen, how do you feel about it? Well, I feel very anxious, right, about that. So if I think about it, I think I don't have enough money, then I'm going to feel very anxious about that. Well, what happens if you decide to think something else? How would you feel if you thought something different? How would you feel if you thought maybe you would have enough money? Because you don't know for certain that you're not going to. So how would you feel? Well, I'd feel a whole lot better. Okay, well, it's your choice then, right? It's your choice. I can choose to think that things are going to be horrible, or I can choose to think that things are going to be better. Okay, that choice is always up to me on what I choose to think. So this is sort of a cognitive way to look at this. Once again, you can go to thework.com. That's her website. She has free worksheets on these sorts of things that you can find on there if you get in there and look around. That'll help you to use these. You can use them for yourself, but you can also help them to use your loved one that you're dealing with. If they're, if it's not a full-blown case, and even if it is, if they're on medication, if they're under treatment, this is something that you can use. Don't have to be a therapist to use this, right? You use it in my daily life. Okay. Is it true? Is it what you're thinking? Is that true? Number one, what are you thinking? But when it is it really true? Can you absolutely be certain that it's true? Well, how do you feel if you think it is true? And how do you feel if you think maybe it could not be true? So we have that. Another thing you can do is have people write down the thoughts, okay? When you write down those thoughts, it sort of takes the power out of them, okay? So writing down the thoughts, those urges sort of get less, okay? And just repeat it, just write it down. If you're thinking it 1,000 times, write it down 1,000 times, right? Or have your loved one write it down 1,000, just write it down, keep writing it until it sort of loses its power. This is sort of the exposure and response therapy, right? I do something over and over again until it loses its power over me. Okay. Once again, writing down the thoughts is much harder than simply thinking them. So they're likely to disappear sooner or later just because it takes so much energy for me to start writing down those thoughts and just keep doing it. Now, if people are going through notebooks, every day in notebooks, then professional help, definitely. But if I'm just having some problems that are causing the thoughts that are causing the anxiety, we'll write those things down and keep writing them until they lose their power, okay? Create a worry period, okay, during the day. I'm going to set aside 15 minutes during this day where I'm going to do nothing but worry. I'm going to engage in all of my worst fears and worst expectations for this 15 minutes. But at the end of that, it's over. Okay. I don't spend the rest of the day. If I have one of them pops up sometime during the day, nope, I've got time tomorrow. Okay. May have to set 2 times, one in the morning, one in the afternoon when I first start. Right. No, I'm not going to think about it right now. I had my worry period this morning. I'll worry about it this afternoon during that period. So set that worry period down. Once again, during the worry period, I may also write them down, okay? So set aside 10, 15 minutes, 1-2 times a day, and really, that's the time that I'm going to worry, and the rest of the time, I'm just going to put it off until that time, okay? What else can I do? Well, don't criticize the person, right? Remember, this is somebody who's feeling anxious, okay? They're feeling very anxious in their life, and this is just something that helps them feel better, okay? It may grate on my nerves, but that's why I want to seek treatment, right? That's why I want to practice cognitive restructure, okay? So avoid making those personal criticism. Once again, not character flaws, okay? They're just symptoms of something that's going on in their life. Don't scold them and tell them just to stop doing it, okay? That's not going to work, okay? It's not going to make things any better. I often see this often pops up with, don't try to reason with them, okay? Don't try to, that's not going to help, okay? Oftentimes, I see this a lot with people with dementia, okay? When people get dementia, their loved ones will often try to reason with them, and I have to remind them that, they can't, if they could reason, they wouldn't be doing it, right? So you're trying to reason with them to get them to stop this is not going to do any good. It's just going to make you frustrated, okay? So same thing with this sort of stuff. Don't just tell them to stop. There's a little, I provided this little humorous link. Some of you are professionals, may be familiar with it already. It's the Bob Newhart Stop It skit. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, give it a watch, okay? Don't do that, okay? Don't, just telling somebody to stop it is not probably going to help them a whole lot. But a funny little skit there if you want to watch that. Be as kind and as patient as possible. Be empathetic, right? So, once again, these people are suffering from anxiety for whatever reason, okay? And what they're doing is helping them deal with that. Remember, I never engage in anything as a pattern of behavior that doesn't help me in some way, okay? Now, it may be bad for me. It doesn't meet my needs in some way, right? It may be bad for me. Substance abuse will kill me if I do it long enough. Other things will as well. But while I'm doing it, it fulfills a need for me, okay? So this is what I'm doing to help, reduce that anxiety in my life, to fulfill that need. So, give them a break. I mean, I know it's hard. I know you have to deal with it all the time. So that's the reason I say seek treatment for yourself. Let yourself get some times to practice mindfulness and things of this nature that can help you, then help them, okay? The other thing is, don't go along with the rituals, okay? Going along with their rituals actually feeds into the compulsion. So don't do that. Okay, this is something we'll talk about this next time when we're looking at psychosis, okay, where you never buy into the psychosis. Now, there's been lots of, we'll talk about it next time as well. There's been lots of movies where, you know, somebody sees squirrels running around and, oh yeah, I see them too. There's that one in there. No, no, you're furthering them. You're getting them deeper into the psychosis. Okay, same thing with this. Don't buy into the rituals. Okay. It only reinforces that behavior. I support the person, but not the compulsion, okay? Or I support the person, but not the psychosis, okay? Do not do that, okay? Not good. Okay, so those are some things that I can do. Keep communication positive, okay? Once again, want to focus on the positive things. Want to always use, many times before, we've looked at those 7 caring habits that we have. Use the caring habits, avoid the deadly habits, find the humor in the situation. And that's what a lot of the movies that we looked at previously, you know, there's some humor in this as it goes. We're not laughing at the person, okay? We're laughing at the situation, okay? Because there may be some humor in that. So look at the funny side of it, the absurdity of it, as a way to sort of become detached from it, okay? As a way to separate myself from it. Focus on the behavior, not on me, and then don't let those behaviors take over your family life. Right? Decide how you're going to work together to help your loved one with these symptoms. Keep everything as normal as possible. Don't buy into the behaviors, and you know, maybe everybody has a stress management that you meet together, you know, for an hour in the evening and go through some stress management together, do some breathing, do some tapping, do some these sorts of things that help reduce my stress. So are we making changes in our lifestyle? Yes, we're doing that to support our loved ones, which may be having a problem with this. And hopefully we're also supporting them in moving past this behavior, okay, whatever it may be, this obsessing and compulsing, we're supporting them in moving past that and getting their life back online. Okay, there's some references for you there. The APA, the new text revision on that just came out. Just got that last month. Came out. Good looking book. It ought to be for what it costs. Okay, Mayo Clinic's always a good place to go. Also, some things online you can look at. If you need to contact me, there's where you can reach me. At the Institute, ron.mottern@gmail.com, or you can reach me through the contact page on the website for the Institute. Okay, any questions? Put that back there. I see there are 4.
There's a few on the Q&A. I think most of the stuff in the chat has been comments, but I'll run back through those as you're looking at the Q&A there.
Okay. Do you see the presence of these obsessions and compulsions occurring, personality disorders in older adults? Once again, something like histrionic, you know, that's sort of this. I mean, it is a personality disorder, certainly, but it's one of those that. Remember, we have obsessive, let me try to frame this. Remember, we have obsessive compulsive personality disorder, which is over in the disorders, but it's in a different class than something like histrionic personality disorder. It is a personality disorder, but do they occur more likely in older people? Is that, if I understand that right, do I see them occurring more in older adults? Not so much more in older adults. Certainly you have to be an adult to get the diagnosis, okay? But not necessarily in older adults. In fact, what we find with personality disorders, as a general rule, we see those characteristics of that sort of flatten out. So they become sort of muted. It's not that they go away, but they're not as over the top as they are. So actually in older adulthood, those tend to level out a little bit more instead of become more of a problem. If it's the disorder itself. I mean, if it's just, you know, I have the characteristic of that, I may, right? If it's just the characteristic things of it, I may become more set in my ways over this. Doesn't make it obsessive compulsive disorder, but I may just become more set in my ways as I get older. So once again, that sort of, let me just distinguish between a disorder, a diagnosable disorder, and just characteristics of it. The characteristics, yeah, I may become more set in my ways as I get older, but the disorder, if it's a disorder itself, especially a personality disorder, the symptoms of that may become more reduced over time, a little bit. Not a whole lot, but a little bit. Do obsessions come after some acute traumatic event? They very well can, okay? They very well can, and this may be the thing that causes the anxiety, right? I have some anxiety in my life that may be caused by trauma, and so for whatever reason, what I do, the compulsion, whatever that behavior is or mental act is, provides me with some relief, okay? A positive one would be like in PTSD, now they use mantra, okay? Now, which is repeating the phrase. I have it's also called sacred word meditation or mantra meditation, where, I may say to myself, just peace, right? Peace, 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 over and over again. So I use that as a mantra. Like I said, sacred word is often because people will also often use things from scripture or things like that. Jesus loves me, Jesus loves me, whatever it happens to be. I use that as a mantra, and that helps me to calm down. So we obviously don't want that behavior in and of itself to become a obsessive compulsive disorder, right? But oftentimes obsessive compulsive disorder can come after trauma, and we can actually use some of these things like sacred word meditation or mantra meditation to deal with things like PTSD. In fact, that's one of the treatments for PTSD now. Connection between obsessive disorders and frontal lobe function or dysfunction. Obsessive compulsive, obsessive disorders, you said, not obsessive compulsive disorder. That would be a wonderful another topic. Marty, take note. That would be another wonderful topic. I'd be happy to speak on that at a later date. I think it's a little. I don't think we have time to do that.
Great.
What would you do to help a teen whose excessive hand washing is due to dad's lack of hygiene? Okay, congratulate them on their neatness, on their concern over it. You did say excessive. I'm sorry, that was you did say excessive hand washing. I mean, you'd have to sort of define what excessive hand washing is. How do you help a teen? I mean, if they just think it, if they have a concern about a lack of hygiene, certainly they want to wash their hands. You watch the little video, the humorous little video that I provided. This is sort of talks about that. Nothing wrong with washing your hands, right? But excessive washing, maybe something there, right? Just have them go talk to a therapist, maybe, or just what's going on here. If it's excessive, once again, and probably want a professional to look at what's excessive and what isn't. Not just you don't know what's normal, but we don't want to diagnose anything here. May just want to talk to a therapist for a couple of sessions, right, to figure out what's going on with the thinking there that's causing that excessive hand washing, and see if that's a problem. OCD and constant use of technology. Yeah. Oh, that would make that would make another wonderful presentation.
Great.
Is there a relationship between the two? There's definitely a relationship between constant use of technology and anxiety, which can lead to obsessive compulsive behaviors. So yeah, that would definitely be another one to, yes, I would like to talk about that more at length.
Nice.
Okay, excessive. Hands are chapped and bleeding every 20 to 30 minutes. Yes, talk to a professional. Okay, yeah, that is indeed excessive. There's definitely some, thinking there that's causing that behavior. This is a good use of cognitive behavioral therapy, right? There's probably some of that thinking is going to be irrational. So there's just addressing what are the irrational thoughts. and going from there. 4 questions might be a good place to start just at home with that. Okay, what is your thinking on this? You know, the one-liner might be, you know, I'm afraid to get something because, you know, afraid to get a disease because of the lack of hygiene. Well, you know you're going to get a disease. Well, no, but I could get one. Okay, do you absolutely positively know you're going to get something? Well, no. So how do you feel when you think that you are going to get something? Well, I feel very nervous and I wash my hands till they're chapped and bleeding. Okay, so what do you feel like when you think that maybe you're not going to get something necessarily? You're still maintaining hygiene, but not until they're chapped and bleeding. Well, you know, I don't feel so bad about it. Probably going to take a little more than that, but that's maybe something that you can do at home about that. But definitely something, you know, a couple sessions with a therapist should probably, you know, use a brief therapy, right? You know, some sort of brief therapy would be appropriate for that, I think.
There's 1 or 2 in the chat. Just so you know, I copied and pasted one. It wouldn't let me put it in the Q&A for you. But Vicky had asked, so someone who might be perceived as vain could actually be dealing with body dysmorphic disorder?
Yeah, it's definitely possible. I mean, because of the constant looking in the mirror, because of the constant focus on my appearance and things like that, that somebody may definitely be considered vain because of that. I mean, if you don't know anything else about what's going on, somebody could very well be considered vain because of that. There may be something deeper going on there. It just depends. You just have to look at it, right? You just have to look at the situation, look at the thinkings going on, and really what's occurring there. But definitely, you would think somebody could be vain, right?
No, Martha says narcissism, please. I'm assuming she's suggesting another topic for one of our webinars.
Yeah. Understand there's a difference between, you know, there's similarities between all of these things. So if you look at obsessive-compulsive personality disorder, narcissism is also a personality disorder. So you may, you know, there may be things that sort of overlap on these, and you may say, well, is that narcissism or is that obsessive-compulsive personality disorder? Especially when you start getting into the control aspects and things like that. But you'll be able to separate those out. So yeah.
Well, I think we've gotten to all the questions as far as I know at this point. Could we advance the slides real quick and let me talk about CEUs one more time and go over that? For all of you joining us for CEUs and for possible certificate of attendance, the guidelines are the same. We are offering complimentary CEUs for social workers and licensed professional counselors in Texas. If you're outside of Texas and licensed someplace else, you're more than welcome to get a certificate. Whether your jurisdiction will take it or not, I cannot tell you. I've had people tell me before that they've been able to use them here or there, but that is purely up to your jurisdiction. We are set up to do this in Texas. Today's webinar is good for 1.5 hours, classroom hours. You must have completed the entire live webinar. I've seen several messages of people getting kicked off. I know if you get kicked off and log back on, it will just add the minutes together, but the minutes need to add up for us to have the documentation that we get from Zoom that we need to justify the fact that you've attended or to acknowledge that. You must complete the Google survey evaluation that should pop up when you close out of the Zoom. If it doesn't pop up, I realize some companies have pop-up blockers that block that. The survey link will be sent to you in the follow-up email later today. The link will be good for 1 week until the 18th. And then if you can give me till the 25th to get those certificates to you, if you don't have it by the 26th, feel free to reach out to me and we'll get that. You will also get a second follow-up email, just so you know, for those of you that are new to us, that will include the recording link We put these up on YouTube and then send the recording link out to everyone who was registered for the event. Feel free to share any of that information with anybody who might be helped by the information, the incredible information that Dr. Ron provided with us for us today. And if we could go to the last slide, Doctor. Appropriate approaches in responding to people with psychosis is our next webinar. It's on Wednesday, May 25th. You will also receive the flyer for that, a link to that, and other webinars that we have coming up. Once again, Dr. Mottern, thank you so very much. Incredible, incredible information.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you all for joining us today. If you think of any questions or anything after the fact, you're more than welcome to email me and I'll forward them on to Dr. Mottern, or you can email him or contact him with any of the information that he gave you today. And that information is in the slides. So he showed that before. Reach out to him. And I'm sure he can help you. Thank you for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you on the 25th.